You're making a mistake, officer. You don't have the right to order me out of this vehicle.
Step out of the vehicle now, or I'll open the door myself and make you regret it.
The tension in the air felt like it could snap at any moment. Officer Jacobs was still standing there, his fingers inches from the car door, breathing heavily as if his words held any power. But as he stared into Carla's eyes, something in her unblinking, unwavering gaze made him hesitate. For the first time that evening, his authority felt distant, insignificant. She wasn't scared, not like the others he'd pulled over. She was calm, too calm, and it unsettled him. The moment stretched out, hanging between them like a wire pulled too tight, ready to snap. His heart was beating a little faster than he was willing to admit, the adrenaline coursing through him. She had barely reacted, barely moved, but the silence was deafening. Every second of stillness was a challenge, one he didn't know how to answer. "Step out of the vehicle," he repeated, more to himself than to her, trying to regain control of the situation. But Carla didn't budge. Her posture was composed, and despite everything, she remained in control. Her hands were still on the steering wheel, fingers relaxed, but the intensity of the moment was palpable. She knew exactly what was at stake. "On what grounds?" Carla asked, her voice steady and measured. The question hit him like a cold wave. He didn't have a good answer, but he couldn't back down now. "I'm ordering you to step out of the vehicle. I believe you're refusing to comply." He barely recognized the words coming out of his mouth. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she slowly reached over to the dashboard, pressed record on her phone, and placed it gently in front of him. "I am complying. I've handed you my documents. I have provided everything you asked for. But you have not told me why I'm being stopped." The words stung more than he expected. For a moment, Jacobs froze. His heart raced and his pride flared. He wasn't just questioning her anymore, he was questioning himself. Why had he pulled her over? He couldn't even justify it now. His pride surged again. "Step out now, or I'll open the door myself," he barked, the anger rising in his chest like a tide. Carla's expression didn't change. She didn't even flinch. "That would be an illegal search," she said simply, her voice still unwavering. "And you know it." The calmness in her voice only made him angrier. The control he thought he had was slipping away. His hand hovered near the door handle. His fingers wrapped around it, cold metal against his skin, but something held him back. He knew he shouldn't be doing this. The second his fingers touched the door handle, something shifted. The small voice of doubt inside him was suddenly deafening. For a split second, he could feel Carla's eyes boring into him. Not fear, not submission, but a quiet, undeniable strength. He had never felt so small, so inadequate. But he didn't let it show. He couldn't. The door handle clicked under his grip. And that's when it happened. A voice shouted from across the street. "Hey, do you know who that is?" The question broke through the tension like a crack in the dam. It wasn't just any voice, it was someone watching. Someone who had been filming this entire interaction, his phone raised, capturing every moment. Carla's gaze shifted briefly to the man across the street. She didn't speak, didn't respond. She just watched him, her hand never leaving the steering wheel. But the message was clear. This wasn't just going to fade away. Jacobs froze for a moment. He could feel his body temperature rising, the sweat trickling down his neck. His mouth was dry. He had just made the biggest mistake of his career. Still, he refused to back down. He couldn't. His pride was too strong. "I need backup," he muttered into his radio. His voice didn't sound as confident as it should have. But before he could say anything else, the man across the street took a few steps forward, his phone still filming. "You don't want to do this, man. Do you even know who she is?" The realization hit Jacobs like a hammer to the chest. The moment Carla had been waiting for. Her expression didn't change, she didn't need to say a word. The young man's voice had already done it for her. And that was when it clicked. The seconds felt like hours as Jacob stood there, frozen, staring at the woman in the car. His fingers hovered near his holster, but he didn't draw his weapon. He was caught. Caught in something far deeper than the routine power play he had planned. Carla Green didn't flinch. Her eyes never wavered from his face. She wasn't angry. She wasn't panicked. She was simply present. Calm, composed as though this moment had already played out 100 times before. Jacobs felt a pit in his stomach. He had seen people like her before, people who walked through life with the kind of quiet power that came from years of fighting battles no one else ever saw. He hated how easy it was for her to remain calm, how her very presence seemed to unravel his control. "I'm not stepping out of this vehicle, officer," Carla said, her voice a steady, quiet challenge. "You have no reason to make me do so." Her words hung between them, heavy with implication. Jacobs could feel the heat rising in his chest, and though he hated to admit it, a small part of him began to question the validity of his actions. "She's a judge, yes, but she's still just a woman in my car, right?" But something in her gaze told him he had made a mistake. She wasn't just a woman. She was an authority, and he wasn't handling this properly. The silence stretched out. Jacobs shifted uncomfortably, his mind racing for an answer, for something to justify his pride. He should have asked more questions, done his job properly, but now he was here, standing on the edge of something bigger than a simple traffic stop. "Step out now," Jacobs barked, his voice louder than necessary. His hand rested on his holster, and he felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the rush that told him he had the upper hand. He could still make this right. He could still control the situation. But Carla didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She simply reached for her phone and pressed record, placing it on the dashboard between them. Her hand was steady, unshakable. "I am complying," she said, her voice unwavering. "You're the one breaking the law here, officer. You're the one escalating the situation." The words hit him harder than he expected. The pride that had been pumping through his veins suddenly felt hollow, as if his very existence had been questioned in a way that wasn't just about his badge, but about his actions, his judgment. "I told you to step out," Jacobs repeated, his voice now strained, frustration mixing with something deeper. Carla's eyes softened, but only slightly. There was no anger in them, no resentment. She was not afraid of him, and that scared Jacobs more than anything else. He was a cop. He was supposed to be the one in control. But in this moment he realized the truth. He was the one who had no control. The air between them was thick, each breath feeling heavier than the last. He had expected compliance. He had expected submission. But this wasn't compliance. She wasn't obeying him because she was afraid. She wasn't complying because she had to. She was complying because she knew her rights, and he didn't. "I'm not stepping out of this vehicle because you say so," she said, a hint of finality creeping into her voice. "I'm stepping out because I have to, and right now, you've given me no valid reason to do so." The silence stretched again, but this time, it felt suffocating, like the air itself was closing in. Jacobs could feel the weight of her words, and the tightness in his chest only deepened. He knew he was wrong. He couldn't back down. He wouldn't. He had been trained for this. He had been trained to assert dominance in every situation. But this was different. He could feel his stomach turn as doubt clawed at him, and for the first time, he wondered if he was the one who needed to step back. But then his pride surged again. He couldn't let it go. "Step out now, or I will open this door myself," he said, his voice more forceful than before. His hand moved instinctively toward the door handle. Carla didn't flinch. "I told you," she said, her voice low but clear. "That would be an illegal search. You know it and I know it." Jacob's fingers curled around the door handle. He was going to open it. He wasn't going to let her talk him down. He wasn't going to let her win. But something inside him stopped him cold. He wasn't sure if it was the truth in her words or the steady certainty in her gaze, but something had shifted. For the first time since the stop began, he hesitated. And in that hesitation, everything changed. Carla didn't take her eyes off him. She didn't blink. She didn't need to. Her power wasn't in her uniform or her title. It was in her presence, in the way she carried herself. It was in her refusal to let him control her with just a few words. He looked at the phone on the dashboard, the red recording light blinking quietly. The situation was now recorded. His actions, his refusal to listen, his pride, it was all there. His pride was his weakness. "Do you really want to make this worse?" she asked, her voice quieter now, but the weight of the question landed like a punch. Jacobs didn't answer. He didn't know how. He just stood there, hands still on the door handle, unsure whether to pull it open or let it go. How had it come to this? The sirens from his radio sounded faint in the distance, but they felt miles away. Backup would be here soon, but Jacobs knew that even if they arrived, nothing would change. Not now. Not after this. He wanted to turn back, wanted to retreat. But the humiliation of backing down in front of her, of acknowledging that he was wrong, was too much for him to bear. The stillness between them lingered, stretching the tension tighter, and for the first time that night, Jacobs wasn't sure if he would ever get control of this situation. His heartbeat pulsed in his ears, and the world around him felt both too loud and too silent. Jacob stood there, hands still hovering over the door handle, his heart racing, his mind filled with a whirlwind of thoughts. He wasn't sure how he had gotten here, how the simple act of pulling someone over had escalated into this confrontation, this standoff of wills, of pride. For a moment, he wondered if this was the universe's way of mocking him. Here he was, an officer of the law, and yet he felt like a child, playing pretend. He had spent years training, years following the rules, and yet now he was standing before a woman who had played by the rules her entire life, a woman who had spent her entire career seeking justice in a system that had never truly worked for her. And in this one moment, she had forced him to face the truth that he had been blind to all along. Carla remained still. Her hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, her eyes never leaving his face. There was no anger in her eyes, no fear. Only quiet resolve. The kind of strength that made Jacobs feel small, as if his authority had no meaning in the face of the truth she represented. She had given him her credentials. She had provided him with everything he asked for. And yet, despite all of that, he was still trying to control the situation. He was still trying to prove something. But what was he proving by pushing her? By refusing to acknowledge her authority, her standing as a federal judge? Was he proving his right to power? His right to judge? Or was he just afraid of being seen for what he truly was in this moment? A man who had no control over the situation he had created. "I told you," Carla's voice cut through the silence, steady and unwavering, "you have no reason to do this. No legal grounds. I'm complying." Her words hung in the air, cutting through the tension between them like a sharp knife. Jacobs felt the weight of them, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing control. Everything was slipping through his fingers. His hand remained on the door handle. He could feel the cool metal beneath his fingers, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. His grip tightened, but the words didn't come. The confrontation felt surreal now. He had always prided himself on being a good cop, on doing things by the book. But in that moment, the book felt distant. The rules felt irrelevant. What mattered now was his ego, and that terrified him more than anything. "Step back," he finally muttered, his voice rough, as if the words themselves were foreign to him now. He wasn't sure if he was ordering her or himself to retreat. Carla didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her stillness spoke volumes. She was unshaken, unmoved, and unwilling to let him take control of her. "I told you," she repeated, her voice calm but laced with something deeper now, something he couldn't quite place. "This is an illegal search. You have no cause to open my door." Jacob stepped back, away from the car, the knot in his stomach growing tighter. How had it come to this? How had he allowed himself to be caught up in this? How had he become the one who was being questioned, the one who had lost control of the situation? The sound of his radio crackled to life again, but Jacobs barely heard it. His thoughts were clouded. His mind was racing, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't seem to think clearly anymore. The words she had spoken, the challenge in her voice, echoed in his mind. "You have no cause. You have no reason." For the first time, Jacobs realized something that made his blood run cold. He was the one who had been wrong. But he couldn't admit it. Not yet. His pride was too strong, too rooted in everything he had built up over the years. He was a cop. He was supposed to be in charge, to be the one who called the shots, to be the one who protected and served. But now, all he could feel was the weight of his own failure pressing down on him. He had let a simple traffic stop become this. Carla was still watching him. Her gaze was steady, unblinking, and it made Jacobs feel like he was standing before an exam he wasn't prepared to take. He wanted to look away. He wanted to turn back, to get out of this situation. But he couldn't. He didn't know what to do next. The radio crackled again. This time, it was his backup. Unit 324, backup is en route. Requesting status. The voice on the radio came through. Code 3, no immediate danger, Jacobs muttered, his voice sounding almost alien to him now. It didn't even sound like him. No immediate danger. But wasn't that what he had been telling himself all along? That this was just another routine stop, another day on the job? That nothing was going to escalate beyond this point? But now, in this moment, he felt everything shifting. The weight of his uniform, the authority that had been his for so long, felt like it was fading away. Jacobs could feel Carla's eyes on him, steady, unwavering. She wasn't backing down. She wasn't going to let him walk all over her, and that terrified him in a way he hadn't expected. This wasn't just a traffic stop. This was something more. He didn't know what to do. But Carla knew. She reached over and picked up her phone from the dashboard, turning it off. The camera, the recording, the moment, it was all captured now. "I'll handle this my way," she said, her voice softer now, but the finality in it was unmistakable. This wasn't a negotiation anymore. This was a line drawn in the sand. Her fingers curled around the steering wheel again, steady and firm, like she was getting ready to drive away. Like she was done with the whole thing. And in that moment, Jacobs realized something that took the air from his lungs. He wasn't in control anymore. He never had been. "You're free to go," he muttered, the words escaping him before he could stop them. Carla didn't say anything. She just nodded once, calmly, before starting the engine. The sound of the car's engine was louder than it should have been, cutting through the silence between them. As she pulled away, Jacobs stood frozen, watching her go. The power had shifted. The realization hit him hard. He had failed. Not just her, but himself. He turned slowly, his steps heavy. The silence inside his cruiser felt heavier than any weight Jacobs had ever carried. His mind raced in a million directions, each thought colliding with the next until they were nothing more than jumbled fragments. He had let it happen. The fear had crept in slowly, like a poison spreading through his veins. Every time he replayed the encounter in his mind, it became clearer. He had crossed a line. Not just with her, but with himself. And he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a bad stop. It was a reckoning. The radio crackled again, snapping him back to reality. His eyes darted to the screen on his dashboard, the call coming through loud and clear. He'd been here before. He had taken calls for backup in high-stakes situations. But this wasn't a high-stakes situation. This wasn't about crime or danger. This was about a single woman in a car. A woman who had just dismantled his sense of control. "Unit 324, please respond," the dispatcher called again. Jacobs didn't answer at first. He wasn't sure he could. His hands gripped the steering wheel, the leather burning his palms. The tension in his chest was suffocating. His badge, the one thing he had used for years to define himself, felt foreign now. He had been the one in charge. But not anymore. Not now. He exhaled sharply and finally picked up the radio. 324, affirmative, he muttered, his voice barely audible. On the move. No further assistance needed. He flicked the switch, cutting the transmission short. There was no one else coming. No more backup, no more excuses. The truth was starting to bleed through the cracks in his armor. And it was undeniable now. His body felt heavy. He wanted to go home, to wash away the humiliation of the stop, to forget the way her calm, unshakable demeanor had unraveled him. He wanted to forget how she had stood her ground without ever raising her voice, without ever seeming to waver. But Jacobs couldn't leave it like that. Not this time. His mind flashed back to the moment when Carla had calmly told him he was breaking the law. The tension in her voice had been more powerful than any order he could have given. He hadn't seen it then, but now he understood. It was never about the traffic stop. It was about him trying to force a situation that wasn't his to control. It was about him losing sight of his purpose. He gripped the steering wheel harder. He couldn't just drive away and pretend it didn't happen. Not anymore. He had to make this right. Without thinking, he shifted the cruiser into drive and pulled out onto the road. He didn't even know where he was going, but the weight pressing against his chest pushed him forward. His eyes scanned the road, the dark asphalt stretching out in front of him like an endless path. The lights from passing cars flashed by in a blur, but Jacobs didn't notice any of it. He wasn't paying attention. His mind kept going back to the stop. The way Carla had looked at him, the way her voice had carried over the tension, like she was already 10 steps ahead of him. And then the moment when she had pressed record. He could still hear her voice, "I am complying. You're the one breaking the law here." The words felt like an accusation, a declaration, and a challenge all at once. It was more than just her voice. It was the way she had said it, like she had all the time in the world to make him face the reality of his actions. It was humbling, and that humility had burrowed deep into his chest. He turned the wheel sharply, the tires screeching as he pulled into the parking lot of a nearby convenience store. The neon lights of the gas station cast a dim glow over the asphalt, but it was quiet, almost too quiet. He parked the car, his pulse still racing in his ears. He sat there for a moment, staring out the windshield. The store was closed, the windows dark. No one was there. But he wasn't alone. The weight of his actions followed him like a shadow, and the guilt that had started as a whisper in the back of his mind was now a deafening roar. He had been wrong. He sat there for several minutes, his hands gripping the wheel as though it could somehow anchor him to the present. He kept replaying the stop in his mind, replaying the moment when he first pulled her over, when he first challenged her authority without even realizing it. Jacob's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a knock on his window. He blinked and turned his head, his pulse spiking. It was Carla. For a moment he couldn't believe his eyes. What was she doing here? After everything that had happened, why was she standing outside his patrol car, looking at him with that same unwavering calm? Carla stepped back when Jacobs rolled down the window, but she didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, her hands folded in front of her, waiting. There was no anger, no fury. She was simply there, and Jacobs felt something inside him twist, something that wasn't fear, but something close to it. After a long moment, Carla spoke. "I'm not here to argue with you," she said, her voice still steady, still controlled. "I'm here because I want you to know something." Jacobs felt his chest tighten. "What's that?" he asked, his voice almost too low. "I'm not angry," she said, her words calm and deliberate. "What happened tonight? It wasn't about me. It wasn't about you. It was about the system, and you know it. But what I do know is this. You made a mistake, and you're going to have to face it. You will have to answer for this." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He wanted to defend himself, to explain his actions, but something in her gaze stopped him. She wasn't accusing him. She wasn't even angry. She was simply stating the truth. And that truth was more suffocating than anything else he had ever faced. Jacobs opened his mouth, but no words came out. His pride felt so small in the face of her calm certainty. Carla turned to leave, but before she did, she looked back at him. "You can run, but eventually, you'll have to stand and face what you did. It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what's right." She paused for a moment, then added, "And right now, you know exactly what you have to do." Without waiting for a response, she walked away. Jacobs sat there for a long time. The next morning, the weight of the night before hung on Officer Jacobs like a heavy fog. The silence of his apartment seemed to press in on him, oppressive and thick. He hadn't slept. Not truly. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, Carla Green, the woman he had tried to control, the woman who had stood up to him without ever raising her voice. She had shown him a kind of power he couldn't quite name, a kind of quiet authority that made his own sense of control look laughable. His thoughts kept swirling, looping back to that moment in the parking lot. Carla had confronted him, but more than that, she had made him confront himself. And it wasn't just a mistake on his part. It was a moment of reckoning. Jacobs couldn't run from it anymore. He had spent the night trying to justify his actions, trying to convince himself that he was right, that maybe she was just another uncooperative driver. But the truth, the one he had tried so desperately to ignore, had settled deep inside him. He had been wrong. Sitting on the edge of his bed, Jacobs ran his hands over his face, feeling the weight of his own failure. The same hands that had once carried a badge with pride now felt heavy with shame. He had been a cop for over 10 years. He had worked his way up the ranks, earned his position, and convinced himself that he had a good understanding of right and wrong. He had played by the rules, followed protocol. But what were the rules when you couldn't even see the truth? What were the rules when your own pride clouded your judgment? The radio crackled in the corner of his room, a low hum in the distance. The familiar sound of his work, his purpose. But in this moment, it felt like a distant echo. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from his partner, Officer Jenna Roberts, asking about his status. She had sent the text an hour ago, but he hadn't replied. He hadn't been able to face anyone. He stared at the screen, his fingers hovering over the keys, unsure of what to say. How could he explain the way everything had shifted? How could he tell her that he was no longer sure of the very system he had sworn to protect? Before he could respond, his phone rang again. This time, it was his sergeant, Rick Harland. Jacobs answered on the second ring, his voice barely above a whisper. "Brenner," Harland's voice was sharp, cold. "We need to talk. Get to the precinct." Jacobs' stomach churned. He didn't need to be told why. He already knew. The department had already started the process of reviewing his actions. The body cam footage from last night had already been reviewed by Internal Affairs. He knew it would be bad, but this was the moment he had been dreading. The moment where everything would fall apart. "I'll be there in 10, Jacobs replied, hanging up without another word. The ride to the precinct felt longer than it should have. The streets of Baltimore were still quiet, most of the city still wrapped in the haze of early morning fog. Jacobs drove without really looking at the road. He was numb, as if his own thoughts had become too heavy to carry. When he arrived at the precinct, the tension in the air was palpable. Officers moved quickly, their faces a mixture of concern and confusion. The word had already spread about him. About the incident with Judge Carla Green. About the officer who had escalated a simple traffic stop into a full-blown confrontation. He walked through the doors of the precinct with his head down, avoiding the stares of the officers who passed him by. He wasn't sure if he could face them. Inside, Harland was waiting for him in his office, a thick file open on the desk in front of him. The body cam footage from the stop was playing on the monitor, its sound low but clear. The moment when Jacobs had reached for the car door, despite Carla's warnings, played out in real time. The footage made it all too real. Harland didn't look up when Jacobs entered. Instead, he stared at the screen, his eyes flickering with a mixture of frustration and disappointment. "Sit down," Harland finally said, his voice like gravel. Jacobs did as he was told, lowering himself into the chair opposite Harland. The room was heavy with silence. "You've been written up twice this year already, Jacobs," Harland began, his voice even, but the weight of the words felt like a hammer striking against Jacobs' chest. "You've been reprimanded for aggressive behavior and failure to de-escalate situations." He paused, leaning back in his chair. "And now this. What the hell happened last night?" Jacobs swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had no excuse. He had no reason for what he had done. No justification for his actions. He was ashamed, but he couldn't find the words to express it. The shame wasn't just about the incident anymore. It was about what it represented. It was about a system that had allowed this kind of behavior for so long. A system that turned a blind eye to officers like him who used their power for their own agendas, their own pride. And that system would never change until people like him admitted their part in it. As Jacobs sat there, he knew one thing for certain. He had to do better. He had to be better. The realization was clear. The reckoning had already begun. He wasn't sure how he could make things right. He wasn't sure if it was even possible. But the first step was admitting his mistake. And that was something he could do. If you've watched this story unfold, ask yourself, how many officers are still out there who need to confront the truth of their own actions? How can accountability truly begin to change a broken system? Let's have an honest discussion in the comments. What would you do if you were in Jacob's shoes? Do you believe a mistake like his can lead to real change, or is the damage done irreparable? Drop your thoughts below. I'm eager to hear your perspective. If you want to see more real stories about accountability, justice, and the choices we all must face, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If this story made you think, give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Let's keep the conversation going, because sometimes the toughest conversations are the ones that need to be heard.